And welcome to my story hour. I'm Kathy Ramsperger. I'm a journalist, humanitarian, and author of the award-winning The Shores of Our Souls and the very soon upcoming 1,000 Flying Things. I'm also a coach who founded Ground One and created Step Into Your Story. And I am here to connect with people who love books. My interviews concentrate on transformational stories of international interest, multicultural relations, and social justice. Those are the three pillars of my interviews. And they all focus on the connections and sometimes disconnections between people. And today's international author is Gloria Mattioni. Welcome, Gloria. Thanks so much for being here.
For having me.
I'm going to show Gloria's beautiful book cover. This is her latest. She's the author of 7 books in both Italian and English, as I read her bio. Isn't it a gorgeous cover? So like me, Gloria's a fiction author, international and investigative journalist, a human rights activist, editor, and former newspaper reporter. She's also lived in 2 countries, her native Milan, Italy, and the States in LA. She also has a mom with Parkinson's, like I do, and that's another connection. And it also helps her understand illness and dying, as well as the joy of an impromptu road trip. Above all, Gloria is a storyteller, and she is the award-winning author of books, as I said, in 2 different languages, 4 in Italian. And I believe this is her first novel in English, and it's just amazing. You would not know English was her second language at all. It's so well written. A little about the book, and then we are going to talk to Gloria. So, a sister's love versus a cruel fate. That's the theme. It's a story of fierce love and heartbreaking grief. Claire Waters, an Italian mystery writer living in LA, rushes to Italy after her older sister's devastating brain hemorrhage, determined to restore her health or help her die with dignity. Claire is a gritty decision maker, a lone wolf who values freedom above all else. Her sister, Ondina, now walking on the edge of death or severely limited life, is wise, cautious, and sociable. They may be different, but have remained close despite the distance. Claire is faced with a dilemma impossible to solve. What a setup for conflict. Would her non-verbal sister want to go on struggling, damaged as she is, or end her suffering? Forsaking her career, Claire hardly leaves her sister's side, refusing to give up the tiniest hope of healing. It takes an exhausting and lonely year for stubborn Claire to surrender enough to listen to her silent sister. I loved this book. So personal to me. So did Barbara Conry. Breathtakingly beautiful, yet fearless and flaunting the ugly realities of life and death, California's Sister will force you to think hard about who has the right to choose, Barbara says. Gloria Mattioni has given us a tender, angry, poetic, heartbreaking novel about the fragility of life, the miracle of sister love, and the potential of self-reflection and outrage and courage. Outrage was mine. Courage, says writer and director Pete McCormick. And author Julie Balco says, this novel moved me to tears in the best way possible. She also says that caretakers and those grieving a loss should read this book, but I have an addition. I'd say it's an important book before someone you love, including yourself, becomes ill, when you're making those living will decisions. So again, welcome, Gloria. It's my honor and privilege to have you here. And let's launch right into questions. I'm wondering what inspired this novel, and it seems to be different than your other writing. Is it, and why?
It's totally different from mine, since it's unfortunately inspired by my experience. Because exactly like Claire in my book, I had a sister who was living in Italy, and we were very, very close. So one day, while I was on a set, taking photo, not myself, I'm not a professional photographer, but for a photo shoot, all of a sudden I receive a call from Italy informing me that my sister suffered a devastating brain hemorrhage. And that was totally unexpected, caught me completely by surprise. And basically my life changed in a second, in a split second.
I'm so
And
sorry.
I did exactly what Claire does in the book. So it took me like about probably 10 seconds to make the decision to run to the airport and just leave with what I had on my back and my computer, basically. I didn't know if I was going to stay there for like 2 days, 3 days, and I didn't know if I was going to see my sister alive. I didn't care. All I cared was to be with her, to get there, and in some way to be with her. Even if they told me she was in a coma, so I didn't know how much she could understand, but I thought she could feel my presence. She could feel the reassurance of knowing that I was with her.
Well, you've done a marvelous job fictionalizing it, and thank you for sharing that it's a true story too. It means the world to me because I've only written snippets of my own friends' chronic illnesses and subsequent deaths too. They all have passed, and I know how difficult it is to write about that sort of topic, and I commend you. Did you decide to make it a novel so you could include Ondita's voice because in point of view, you do
Definitely.
beautifully that way?
Not only that, in the beginning, I thought that I couldn't write it as a memoir. I wanted the distance the fiction gives you. I'm a big fan of the quote by Albert Camus that fiction is the light through which we tell the truth, which is very, I don't know, it really resonates with me. And in the very, very beginning, I desire the maximum possible distance because I was breaking down every time I tried to write the story. So I started to write it as a screenplay, actually.
Hmm,
But because I'm very visual, so usually my
okay.
writing is also very visual. So I thought, that's great. I just write it like that. And then, as always, you try, and then it's trial and errors. And I realized that the screenplay didn't allow me to go deep into my character's emotions.
That's
It
why I
was like
love
that.
fiction. Mhm.
At the same time, like you said, I wanted to give Ondina a voice. I wanted to give the sister who lost her voice, wanted to give her back her voice. And how can you do that? I mean, how can you give a voice to somebody who is not talking and probably not even thinking linearly like we think, because her brain was damaged, and particularly the left side of the brain and the center for speech was damaged. So I had to research a lot. I had to really understand what could be the bits and pieces of thinking of a person while she was in that state. And at the same time, it helped me to go through all my sister's journal, my real life sister's journal, scrapbook. She was a great traveler, so she always left, memories of all their travels, and um, journaling every day what she was doing in different countries, and letters, handwritten letters. The book starts with a handwritten letter, and that's exactly what I wanted to have, the beauty also of writing letters. I'm actually teaching a little course in a library for middle school kids about the ability to write, starting with postcards and then letters, to write down your emotions in handwriting.
Oh, that's so needed right now
So
because
needed, because otherwise it's all,
well,
like
it's all
social
essays
media
then,
campaign.
and they have their place, but not everything is about proving a point or um, there's a certain informality to writing, at least in English these days, that they would be missing if they just wrote essays all the time. And plus, it's personal.
Yeah.
What a service you're doing. I'm sorry to interrupt, but that
No, no, absolutely. It's a great interruption, because actually it helps the understanding of why this is important. And I'm a big fan of that. I mean, I get really happy when I get a postcard or a letter in my mailbox. Even if, of course, all of us get a million emails a day, it's totally different. And texting even
there's the
worse, not because
tactile part of it too. The
you're
touch.
right. Yeah. So it's exactly, it's the sensory experience. To me, it's the same. Like I'm kind of old style on that. I mean, I do have a reader, of course. I read books both in Kindle and paperback, but I do prefer definitely the hard copy of a book, because it's a sensory experience,
Obviously.
the feeling. Yes, exactly. So my house too is basically a library, full of books that then, but and thank goodness for free libraries. So now when I have books that I don't need anymore or I don't care anymore for, I just drop them in free libraries around town, everywhere. But yeah, so that's how I decided to write a novel. And I also started to write first only in Claire's voice, and Claire is my narrator. But it was missing a mirror, often a divergent one. I wanted to have the other sister perspective of the same situation, the same scenes, the opposite point of view. Sometimes, of course, is like the opponent of Claire, no, the other sister, and that is a very interesting experience. I love, generally speaking, I love books with multiple point of views.
I
I
do
think
too.
it's really nice. Yeah,
Because we all see the story differently, the
yeah.
story of our lives, the fabric of our lives. And we could talk a long time about that, but because I wrestle with it each book I write, because I want more than just the protagonist. But we'll talk on that another day. Um, so I'm always attracted to novels in which settings are almost characters. I think it's because I grew up in the American South, and it was like a living, breathing presence to me. And I'm wondering how this is about you in real life. How wh- why you came to LA? Was it career or something else? And you seem to love it. And how you feel as a person in LA versus Milan.
Yes,
Milan.
a very interesting question. Thank you for asking. Yeah, personally, I can start with what attracted me to America, to the United States. And that basically uh, was open space. Because Europe is almost every country in Europe, at least Western Europe, is very crowded. So I felt the pressure, the pressure of so many people, so much energy, so much interference, and that really influences you. So when I started to travel, because as a journalist, of course, I was also traveling back and forth to different countries. And when I started to come to the United States, in particularly not only staying in the big cities, but just driving to the open road and
A lot of
see,
space.
yes, how much open space there was. For me, it was a revelation, really an epiphany, because it made me feel like all of a sudden I had like is like space inside. I felt like my heart was opening, my not only my mind stimulated, so that was great. But I had to live in a big city for many reasons. Once because it was I decided to move on my own. I didn't have an offer for a job or anything like that. So it was a career move determined by
Courageous.
right,
Courageous.
my love of change, And so I was, okay, I'm going to freelance. I'm a journalist. I can come on a press visa. And I didn't know if I wanted to stay just a couple of years, sorry, not days, or longer. And so I started to explore. And I'm from Milan, and Milan is too similar to New York City. So I was going a lot to New York for work, but I felt the same. When I was in New York, I felt always press to be always on the go, always going somewhere, always doing something. Because in New York, you feel great if you are busy. If you are not busy, you don't feel good. There is
Right.
nothing, it's very, very difficult. And I was so surprised to find out that instead in Los Angeles, people were so laid back. I mean, they would get things done, but in a different way. And I loved it. And then there was still another reason that was still about space. That was basically the geographic location, because Los Angeles is an hour drive basically from the ocean, the mountains, desert. So it's really special and it appealed to me. But
Mm.
the main reason to stay in Los Angeles was actually the people, the Angelinos. And the people in Los Angeles is exactly like the neighborhoods in Los Angeles. So they are different depending on where you live. I've been living in many different places in Los Angeles, from the west side to the east side. It's like different continents almost.
It is.
It is. So the variety of this huge melting pot, basically, with people who come from different countries, social backgrounds, ancestry, really fascinated me. I felt home, maybe for the first time, because I felt like even if I didn't belong, nobody belonged in Los Angeles. So it was perfect. Yeah.
I totally understand that because I feel more at home in Europe than I do here. And so it's almost as though we have a path, a life path, and when we're born, I moved a lot as a child too, I have to say. So that might have been part of it, but um, we're supposed to end up someplace, right? And it's almost like we have a homing device that sends us there. But what a courageous thing to do. And you were working for Vogue in Milan, yes?
I was working for a different magazine. Yeah, I started very young, like when I was 18 in Condé Nast, the publishing house of Vogue and all those magazines. And yeah, I actually went to create the Italian edition of Glamour magazine. So I was 18, and that was for young women. And then I I started my career in journalism and went to many different magazines and newspapers too. And then I started to work also in television, reporting, and all of that. Very mixed career in journalism. And
I understand. I have the same. So let's get back to the book. Let's start with the beginning, and I'm going to read just a bit. This is not the prologue, but it is the first chapter. And it's such a powerful use of foreshadowing. You just blew me away. And I came back to the end. I promise I won't tell the end. And I thought, oh, let it be there too. And it was. No more on that, though. So Claire is out running in the LA hills with, I'm going to call it her rescue dog, but it's more complicated than that. And here's what happens. Almost there. Is his name Drago or Drago?
I'm sorry?
Drago or Drago? The dog.
Oh, Drago.
Drago.
Like dragon, basically.
Okay,
But
that's what I
A
thought.
in Italian.
Almost there, Drago, I said at the 2-mile mark, mostly to reassure myself. Drago would have gone for 20 if I'd keep up. His left ear was missing the upper part, so that only the right pricked up on his large pit bull head, honoring his other half German Shepherd genes. There were old puncture wounds on his neck, random scars covering part of his shoulders, but the shepherd fur hid most of them. When Xavier rescued him from the shelter, he was told he'd been used as bait in an underground dog fighting ring. His still whole ear was up and cocked forward now. He'd stopped in his tracks, sniffing the air. What's up, bud? Excuse me. Then I spotted it, a fresh paw print, bigger than the width of my hand. It was still early, but the wintry lemony sun had risen, so it was unlikely for a mountain lion to be out hunting. Still, the hair on the back of my neck prickled. Unlikely doesn't mean impossible. Adrenaline creeping up the finer nerves of my forearms gave my skin tiny flashes, like a million pinches. They could have lit the Hollywood sign. Despite my love for all kinds of animals, being caught by surprise by a wild cat wasn't on my bucket list. I blinked, wiped sweat from my forehead, and crouched, scanning the immediate surroundings to spot where a big cat might be lurking. The right leg of my jeans snared on the pads of a prickly pear cactus. A gamey scent lingered, with the hot, sour mix of tarry chaparral and pungent eucalyptus. Drago's nostrils flared, black fur raised along his spine. I freed my leg and glanced at the bike path bordering the Los Angeles River on one side and Interstate 5 on the other. And I'm going to spoil this particular one. They do get out. The whole time you're thinking, oh my gosh, is this what's going to happen? And it sets up the whole rest of the book, because that mountain lion is always there, always.
Yep. Yeah, that's what I wanted. You got it perfectly, to use as a metaphor, like this lingering presence, this doom in some way, and what could happen. And in some way is the inciting incident, no, of the book. And yeah, I did like that a lot. And
well, so did I, and so will so many. It sets up the whole premise, really, of the book, because in a way the reader is perched there waiting for the mountain lion, and then waiting for it again, and then waiting for it again. superb. I just loved it. And I'm wondering how and why did you decide to begin with the sense of smell? And you do bring it back. Sensory. Your novel is so sensory.
Yes, I do. I always try to write from the senses, no? So every time I set a scene, I ask myself more than anything else, yeah, sure. What does it look like? But what is the predominant scent in this scene, in this particular scene? And smell is definitely my strongest sense. I'm not so much like,
You-
people are, I'm visual, but I'm also so connected with the sense of smell. And that's a blessing and a curse sometimes. But that's how it is. So when I set a scene, I definitely think, oh, I want to recreate the kind of smell that when I'm picturing this, what does it smell like? Because even you've been traveling abroad a lot. When you go to another place, particularly another country, before you were mentioning when we were setting up Morocco, and I remember when I was in Morocco, oh my God, the smells, was even the thing that stayed most with me, more than the sceneries, more than the Sahara Desert, the visual, I mean, was the smell, how it did it smell, because it was so different from what I knew. So I always try to include that in my books. And in this particular book, I also try to include a lot touch. And why? Because the reality is that when a person is in a condition like the sister who gets sick is, and in her case is lock-in syndrome, but it could be vegetative state. Anyhow, when you lost your abilities and you can have most of your senses impaired, like your hearing, your eyesight, of course, your taste, because maybe you don't even, you're not even able to eat from your mouth, but you get fed from, by a GI tube. What remains many times is touch, because the person can feel from her skin. So physical contact and is very important. Physical contact is a way to reassure the person, to make her feel your presence, to make her feel you are with her. And that I think is very important, not only with people who are sick, but sometimes I think about aging people, or the elders, because everybody loves to hug kids or, or young people. It's very hard that people are so affectionate with the elders, and instead is so important. And that's why elders many times have a great relationship with kids, because kids are so spontaneous and natural, and they love to hug their grandparents in a way that adults many times don't. So to me, I wanted that. I wanted to show that that is a very important thing. And that's one of the things that I learned also through my experience. So
It's the way they communicate with each other, partially too. They always know what each other's feeling to a degree because of that touch.
right.
Um, that's I just want to say that if I pass, they say the last thing you lose is your hearing, but your sense of hearing, I think it's going to be my smell. So I loved that part. And I also totally agree about touch. It's so important. I'm going to check and see if we have any questions. And if not, we will continue. But please, everyone, if you're watching this on replay, feel free to put in questions and comments, and I'll make certain that I get them to Gloria. And maybe I can answer a few too. So, so we'll continue. My mother had Parkinson's from the time I was 12 until she passed when I was 45. She was 79. And we had a really loving relationship, but it was like most mothers and daughters, full of friction. And when I was trying to somehow find a cure for her, which never happened, was long before Michael J. Fox. It was in the 70s. I came across Louise Hay probably in the 80s, and it was about, I always found it ironic that my mother was controlling, and that that her fear of being out of control actually came to be. Her body was out of control. And Louise Hay says it's fear and desire to control. And the affirmation that I was trying to get my mother to say sometimes, but she never would: I relax knowing that I am safe. Life is for me. I trust the process of life. And I'd just like to touch on that a bit, partially because we're both daughters of mothers that with Parkinson's, partially because it's such a wonderful and complex, it adds complexity to your book, that you've got a mother and a sister who are disabled, and you're left there.
Yeah.
And do you think our emotions are part of what happens to us, or do you think it's random?
No, I think definitely part of us, but of course with differences. And that's what I also try to transmit also when I wrote the mother's character in the book, and which
Yeah.
I have a lot of tenderness for this character, because um, it's incredible the compassion that, and you have been through that, so you know. My mom too, being a very controlling mother, and she had lots of problems to give up already when she was sane, meaning when her two daughters became independent, and they
Yes.
live in the house, and they were making their own choices in everything, and that not always pleased her. And so it was very hard for her to let go, to let you live your life. But until she had herself, of course, was a little easier because she could still control her own life. But like you said, when you cannot control your body because it doesn't respond to you, that becomes a huge problem. And there is a conflict there that is, it's killing you. I mean, if you are a controlling person, you know? And that's what I really wanted to show in the book.
Yeah.
That
That's why it's such a personal story for me, was
yeah, you
yeah,
recognize some of
I
the
recognized it all.
traits.
I did.
Yeah, 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 and it's true, because exactly like even when somebody is in a condition of such weakness physically, and become, maybe they were very independent people, and then all of a sudden they have to depend on you or on strangers, caregivers, and that is very hard, very
It is.
hard.
It
And
must be the hardest thing in the world. I can't imagine. From a very young age, I've always prayed that I just keel over one day, because uh uh but you know, what will be will be.
yeah, we cannot control that too. Right? Yeah.
So I wanted to read just a bit with the little bit of time. It goes so fast. what we were speaking about in terms of Ondina's point of view. And this is from chapter 19, 118, and I may go into 119 the page 118 through 19. And this is 9 weeks after what happens. Better. She said this place was better. It's not. I still sleep with a neon lamp on top of my head, and people come and go at night, flashing lights in my eyes, turning me on one side or the other. Then they disappear for hours, letting me stir in my wet diaper without even checking. I fear them. I fear the white coats when they burst into my room early in the morning and shout stupid orders one after the other like machine guns. They're done before I can even grasp the meaning of the first. Try to respond. They scribble on my chart and vanish, leaving me there alone. I hate them. I hate the nurses who fake cheerful smiles while they wash and dress me, to be trapped in that horrible fishnet like I was an octopus. They lift me up all wrong, crooked and unbalanced, then lower me to my wheelchair. Her only time that she seems to be at peace at all is in the garden, and with some friends, but not all. It's so well written, because anybody that's been in the hospital, it would be like a living hell to have to live there. So well done, and that's really all I want to say about that. I just wanted to give the people that hear us a chance to hear that voice as well. So now you've heard from Claire, and now you've heard from Ondina. And I also wondered if Claire would have returned to Italy for anyone other than Ondina.
Honestly, I don't think so.
I didn't either.
Right. Definitely Claire loves her mom, and she would fly back to help her passing, transitioning to the other side. But, or if her mom needed immediate assistance, but she would not give up her career and stay at her mom's bedside for a whole year like she does for her sister. And why? They're not biological twins, but they are definitely soulmates. And Claire, not that she knows that before, but when her sister gets sick and she's in such a miserable state, Claire changed her mind, because even if she remembers the promise, the pact that they did when they were children, don't let me live a life which isn't life, she realized that she has absolutely no idea how to live without her sister. And if her sister dies, she won't have a reason to live. She feels like she would be crushed, like cut in two parts, and one of that would be on the ground, would be, or underground, actually. And that seems to be a selfish thing, but it's not, actually. It's, and here we could open a huge parenthesis about survivor's guilt. It's that she feels like she couldn't enjoy life, and she couldn't enjoy a lot of things if her sister couldn't enjoy the same things. So definitely not. She wouldn't do that. She wouldn't go back for anybody else like she did.
And you show that superbly at the beginning in the prologue, at the end of the prologue, because they make a pact for readers that are wondering what they did. Back in the day, we used to slice our finger and put them on our friends and say we're soul sisters or blood sisters or whatever. Andina is a good bit older than Claire, and Claire protests and says, gross. And she said, okay, so we'll use spit. So maybe I'll read that too, because it's lovely. It's just a paragraph. But I don't want to bleed. Don't cry. We can spit on our hands then. Gross. Still, it beat the pain from a cut. Spit, she ordered, and I expelled a good chunk of saliva on my palm while she did the same. Now shake. We promise that we will never, ever end up like Aunt Giuseppina. And if we do, you know what I mean. It was really funny. I wasn't sure what she meant, but I felt heartened that she went along with my plan. We had a pact, an allegiance sealed with spit, which my sister assured me was as good as blood. We were stronger now, reinforced by our renewed sisterhood. They've seen a movie about Vikings, and she says, fierce Norsemen sisters. We'd never yield to a terrible fate. We had forbidden it.
Yeah, and they are, Claire is 7 years old and Rondina is 3 years older, so 7 and 10. So of course they have like a child vision of the blood pact, but they adapt it to their own reality, and that pact remains for life, is something that comes back when Claire is on the plane going to be with her sister in Italy.
It made so much sense, and yet it was so heartbreaking. We had forbidden it, that line. So I want to talk a little bit about your ability to both have tender moments and romance and even funny moments, and yet to talk about the brutality of having a chronic illness, even a terminal illness. Maybe I'm not talking about these characters. I'm talking about overall, because we see a number of different people, a number of different stages, and how clear with the details you are. Very vivid writing, and it made me understand why the decision for Claire was so difficult, even though she was furious at the beginning. And I'm hoping you'll tell us why such a decision was so difficult for her and for all of us, really, I think, and how there's a fine line between hope and doubt in a situation like this.
Yeah, I think it's, like you said, it's for everybody. It's difficult for everybody. In Claire's case, I created her as a character that who never doubt herself and always convinced that as long as she put her mind to something, she can achieve it. So she always had this feeling of invincibility. That is, even if she is, when she goes to Italy, she's 43, so she's not so young. And usually this feeling of invincibility is something that we have when we are young, right? That we believe everything is possible. But Claire maintains that throughout her life, and also because she is able to live her life like that. So definitely she's not afraid. She's really unafraid. She throws herself into situations with little caution. And so when her mind, not even her mind, let's say her heart, where she has a change of heart, meaning when she arrives to Italy, in the beginning, she's thinking that when she goes there, she's thinking that most likely she'll have to help her sister to die. And that would be a crazy battle because of the health system, and we can talk about that, but not in this question. And then instead, she's shocked by all of a sudden she's overwhelmed with this crazy love and this feeling that she has to help her sister to recover, and she can, and maybe she's the only person who can help her to do that, because definitely she doesn't trust the medical system, she doesn't trust the health system, she doesn't trust the medical personnel to do that. So she's like, I'm gonna take care of her, I'm gonna take in my hands her care and all of that. And she does that, and
She's like a warrior woman about it too.
she's
She
definitely a warrior woman, and many times throughout the book, she also has some doubts, like, what if this is not what Ondina wants? What if I'm pushing her too hard? What if I'm putting her through almost torture, as their mother suggests, because her mother at some point is like, why don't you let her go in peace? And the problem is she wouldn't go in peace because the problem is that she's not going, it's not like you can snap your fingers and make her go. But Claire is not ready yet, is still thinking that there is more that can be done, and she's fighting and fighting, and she goes above and beyond. She even takes her sister home when finally the rehab clinic where she has been able to put Ondina in decides that it has been enough, that she's not recuperating. And so they have to devolve the resources to some patients who have more possibilities to recuperate. And so they send.
so timely right now because we're just getting to the end, hopefully, of this pandemic. These choices were made daily.
Absolutely, exactly. And then, of course, when you get out of a rehab like that, where do they send you? To long-term care. But long-term care many times means only to keep the patient alive with medications and things like that, but they are miserable. And so Claire doesn't want to do that, takes her sister home and tries everything, even learning physical therapy to give her sister more and all of that. But yeah, there is a point where finally she realized that it's not about always winning the battle, it's more about what you are there for. And at the end of the day, really is about love. So it's about feeling, about making feel the other person that no matter what will happen, you are there with her. And that's a huge epiphany for Claire.
And would you say that's how she matures in terms of love from the beginning?
Completely, like when she finally can feel this opening, to unconditional love, because the two sisters grew up in a broken family and they react in completely different ways. So Claire becomes completely independence and freedom are her most important values. So she lives her life accordingly. So she never let anybody really in. So she has a perfect relationship with Javier because Javier is happy too that way. He's happy to be best friends with benefits, to be roommates, to have a great sexual relationship, and to be definitely companions, but still it's not like being together with a spouse or with a fiance or even a boyfriend that is recognized, and they have different social lives, different friends and all of that. And she's happy that way. But after this experience, she realized that she's missing out. That she always says she wants to live her life to the fullest, and instead there are many gates, to feeling everything.
Well, and what a gift the two sisters give each other, and it's through the pain. And it's my theory that that's the only way we grow. It might be why we're here. Hopefully, wherever we go after this, if we go someplace, it doesn't have this kind of
So
emotional
much
pain.
pain, right? So much pain is so much beauty, of course.
Yeah, well, and you do that so well in terms of when she's out in nature, when they're both out in nature, frankly. There's a lot of joy in this book. It's not all pain. So I know we could talk about the healthcare system across the world. I'm experiencing it myself right now. But I hope we can touch just briefly on what people who have not been a patient advocate should be prepared for, because that's something else you describe in wonderful detail, is how Claire is at the beginning. Even though she's angry, she becomes more and more the voice of her sister. And
having a healthcare directive is very important, but you cannot count only on that. Like then of course it depends on different situations and countries. In the United States is better than in Italy, because that's an experience that I had. Italy, unfortunately, is a place where state and church are not separate. They come together. And so even the healthcare system is heavily influenced by the church in, good and bad, meaning there are incredibly great nuns, volunteers who help in hospital, and that made possible also universal healthcare, because in Italy healthcare is free. It's not perfect, but
wonderful.
definitely,
Yeah.
definitely is a great thing to have. But on the other side, I have to say, here in the United States, and particularly in some states, that if you want, I can tell you which ones they are.
Certainly, I'd love to know.
Okay, yeah.
I mean, if it's not a long list, maybe a couple of examples.
No, there are only 10, so it's not really a long list. I wish it was more than that, but we have actually end of life laws that allow compassionate choice, let's call it. And there is a great organization in America, by the way, by this name, called Compassionate Choice, that everybody, just for the listeners, everybody can go Google that, go to the organization. They give you plenty of information about everything you can do online, your healthcare directive, you can do your live will, you can do a lot of things. No? But talking about the states where you have this possibility, it's actually, beside California, it's only 9 states. So it's basically Oregon. Let me go from the west, Oregon.
Oh, well, you don't have to do it the whole thing, the whole list. It's okay.
So anyhow, there are 9 states. You can Google, everybody can Google them. No?
Compassionate care.
I mean, 10 states, including California. And those are the only ones where the right to die with dignity is recognized by law. In Italy, years after the story in my book is set in 2008, at the time there was no healthcare directive, so there was no law allowing that. Now there is this possibility to do this basically handwritten document that you deposit, and the problem is nobody cares. So you do it, but unless you have somebody advocating for you and asking the medical personnel to enforce it, nobody cares that you have it. Unless you are you have a terminal illness in the last stage. And that basically is hospice. So it's not really the same thing. It should be
It's a
different.
fine line, and it's been my experience too. I left for 2 days, and I should not have left. So that's my advice to anybody whose loved one is, I'll say, flirting with death. Don't leave that bedside. If it's years, you have to leave at some point.
Yeah, but yeah, no, it's true. Yeah.
Um,
So important to have somebody advocating for you, I think, in some way. Of course, not everybody has the same resources, not everybody has the education, the ability to, because you need to research a lot to be an advocate. You need to be
it's
credible.
very true. And yet it is something that I believe every person needs to know a little bit about, at least the laws and the medical system. And I just thank you for writing this book, because it's so brave and so honest, and I know it will change lives. I know that, because if I had had that book in, I don't know, 1990, my decisions would have been different, not my whole life. So thank you.
Thank you
And
for saying that.
well, it's true.
That's really, wow.
So one final question before we talk about what's next for you, Gloria. Why did you call it California Sister? Because Claire was the protagonist? Or
No, because that's how Undina calls Claire when she's talking about her with people who don't know her sister. So she's kind of in a light way calling her my California sister.
See, thank you. I'm so glad I asked that. I'm so glad I ended with it, because I knew there was more to it. So please let us know how this book serves as prologue to what's next. I think we have something
It
great.
does. Definitely does. And yeah, there will be some characters coming back, because what I'm writing now, I mean, I wish I would be really writing now. I just wrote only 2 chapters, but I'm not a plotter, I'm more like a pantser. So I still don't have a perfect outline, but I do know that I'm gonna write basically a detective story, and the main character, the story will be driven by Nails, which is the female detective, who is the protagonist of the books written by Claire in California Sister. And that would be still set in Los Angeles, but also a lot in the desert, in the Mojave Desert. And the social justice theme in the background here is death and this sex trafficking of minors.
Fantastic. I can't wait. I mean, I think that's another book that's going to change lives. At least it's going to open a conversation. That's why I write my books, is to open the conversation.
Yes, that's exactly my point. Books should do that, in my opinion, and fiction particularly. Because like you said, it can be a tough theme, but you can lighten it up with some humor, with some joy, and it really helps. Sometimes hearing stories, yeah, told in a different way from the news.
So something to look forward to with great anticipation. So while I check for questions one last time, would you tell us any upcoming events where people can find you, where they can find you online?
Well,
Any
in
other
person,
information?
yes, in person, I'm going to be at the Los Angeles Times Festival of Books Saturday.
Oh, that's
If
fantastic.
somebody's in Los Angeles, but I know not everybody is. Still in person, I mean, I love to do book clubs, both in person and Zoom, and I'm always available to do that on my website, that is gloriamattioni.com. There is a form to fill up, and telling me what would be the timeline and the favorite days, favorite hours, and all of that. And depending on the location, I'm always trying to accommodate, because that's the part that I love about marketing your own book.
too.
The
Me
only
too.
part, right?
I
It's
so get it.
yeah, right. So I do book signings as many as I can, because I love to meet readers. I do book clubs. I do these kind of things. And then, of course, on my socials, Facebook, I have my author page. So Gloria Mattioni author, easy to find. On Twitter and Instagram is basically my first and last name. So it's Gloria Mattioni. Those are my handles. And yeah, these are the three platforms, the only three platforms I chose to use socials. Otherwise, it's too time
I
consuming.
think it's good to simplify. So, and that's plenty. So thank you again. I always have my yogi tea bag at the end, and
So,
it says live consciously. That's what Claire does so well. And I just pull these and they seem to be accurate. So uh,
couldn't be more
Claire,
accurate.
and it's probably you too. So thank you for this book,
Thank
Cowboy
you.
Sister.
Really.
And thank you for your courage with your own family, and also being such an activist and an advocate for this, for suffering, right? We all need it. Everybody, you can join me here every third Thursday at my Facebook page, interviewing authors like Gloria. We'll be here again live with award-winning YA author Michelle Kwasniewski next month, and that'll be on May 18th. So feel free to comment, question underneath the announcement, or come live. I know it's a little bit difficult because we're all out and about these days, but please do watch the replay either here on Facebook or on YouTube. And again, you can find Gloria at Gloria Mattioni. Her last name is spelled Mattioni.com. And you can find more about me at katherinebrownramsperger.com and ground1coaching.com. I'm wishing everyone a very happy spring. And on the page, tell me if you're traveling. I would love to know where you're traveling to. And if you'd like to recommend an author or a great book that you'd like to be on the podcast, remember my 3 pillars. And please do be in touch. And no matter what, I wish you a great book to read, and perhaps it'll be gazing out of a plane or a train window. Thank you so much, Gloria, for being with
Thank
us.
you for having me. It was such a great conversation.
I totally agree. I loved every minute. And I wish you much success at a great event on Saturday.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I'm looking
Thanks.
forward to that. It's exciting.
It is exciting. Thank you. Bye.